In this video, we show how in ILTS a multi-governance or multi-framework setup can be accommodated. What do I mean by multi-governance setup, first of all? Let's say you're a Canadian company who has activities both in Canada and the US. As you can see from this view, this user is being logged in as someone who has access to the Canadian governance, so that one that falls under E23. And for instance, when they look at their inventory, they will see that the inventory follows a structure where there are some models, some AI use cases, and AI systems. So this representation, for instance, could be one that can accommodate specific AI governance requirements. And let's stick to an example where we have this AI-assisted credit approvals for commercial loans. So this is a use case that may be using an AI agent. And first of all, you can see that all the items in the inventory for the Canadian user show governance being Canada E23. So if we take a look at this use case, first of all, the use case here, the way it's represented, contains some information, some key attributes. For example, here there is a box where we can capture the purpose. Of course, the representation of this type of a use case can be, quite customized in ILTS, so it doesn't have to be like it's displayed now. What's important, though, is of course that it will contain, given that it follows Canadian E23 based governance, specific objects that allow you to keep track of, collect evidence to comply with that particular governance. And you will notice that, for instance, there is an element, the tab called classification here, which we'll come back to, which is required to classify the use case basis of risk classification. In fact, you can see the results of this classification already here also as a field. So in this case, high risk is the class that is being classified to, and I can show in a moment what that will look like, how the classification looks like. But also we can also see that, for example, there are some dependencies that are tracked for this particular object. In this case, if I look at dependencies, I see that indeed this use case is being built, or this agent is being built into the Google agent platform. So in this is a separate item in the AI system inventory that we looked at earlier, but we can track the dependency with that because this is something that typically different stakeholders will maintain, maybe some more like AI engineers will maintain how the agents are built inside, in this case, of the Google agent platform. But now what's interesting is that, again, because this follows the Canada E23 governance, again, we wanted to look at classification related information because that's what is required to be done as part of E23 to classify AI use cases in terms of their risk. So the classification here, it's a record that was created for this particular use case, whereby we see a link to a process as well as the results of a questionnaire. In this case, you can clearly see that one of the questions were answered is that this is obviously a credit-related application, which of course has social impact, and therefore the answer yes to this question automatically classifies this use case as high risk. So why this is important? Because of course then the strict scrutiny or more governance will be required given the result of this classification. Now, so because we are talking about now a multi-governance setup, so let's say I have the same agent being used also in the US. And as you know, in the US, the governance around GenAI, at least according to SR 26-2, is being explicitly mentioned as being out of scope. So in that case, of course, you probably will expect a bit of a less scrutiny or a lower level of details to be followed. So if I now access the application, pretending that I'm a user from that governance, so again, I will switch to a different view now that I have US governance. So of course you can appreciate that you can have users that can see both one and the other. Maybe this is what I can show at last in this video. But now if I access this application as if a US person that want to have access only to SR 26-2 related requirements or compliance related requirements, in fact, you can see that the inventory now looks even different. There are the models, the tools, and a candidate element. So the AI use case inventory is not call out separately because we don't have a separate governance for example, for Gen AI or AI agents in the first place. But in the models inventory, for instance, I will be able to see that indeed the AI agent is being also used in the US. So the same agent, again, used for credit approvals, commercial loans, is also used in the US. So that you can see that this time now the right governance is US SR26-2. But this time, if I access this agent use case, I can see that, first of all, this looks different than the representation we saw before for the Canadian governance. And in fact, you can appreciate that the classification tab is actually something not really specifically required because, again, at least in this particular configuration, we have assumed that there is no need to classify specifically the use case or the model in this case according to that classification we saw earlier. But of course, we can see some other type of information being displayed here, and maybe the tiering approach to follow SR26-2 kind of implementation is being followed here. And maybe just to conclude, if I just show you that maybe some users that are maybe enterprise model governance users of the application, and in this case, they can maybe have access to both US and the Canadian governance. So when they log in, then now they will see the word from the perspective of seeing both governances. In fact, they see that they see all inventories, and then in fact they will, if in the AI use cases, of course, they will see then the previous items. In the models, they will see that there are some models, including the one that is being shown earlier, the agent, but there are some other models that are actually owned by Canadian, the Canadian sort of governance, as well as other US related model being displayed in the inventory for a basically comprehensive union, let's say, of all assets across governances, in this case for this user.